Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 o'clock on the West Coast. Patrick Scott here in my new office. I don't know if I can show it to you. Um, it's been a work in progress, and so I'm just going to turn my camera around, and you can see I have a beautiful view, and I'm very happy. I've got the podcast area set up. It's not big, but it's really nice. It's a beautiful view of the courtyard here at Heads Up in Las Vegas, and feeling very comfortable in here. So coming to that from Las Vegas, where it's beautiful. It's already getting warm here. And today, I want to bring you up to date. I had a lovely level 2 class last week up at Mount Charleston. We had a blizzard, and we had about 30 some people in the room, and everybody was real troopers. They did great. Class ended on Sunday afternoon. It is now Friday, and we've had a week here at the clinic. A lot going on in the world. I want to talk today about cycles and rhythms as it relates to the 10 worlds of Buddhism. And I've been Buddhist since I was about 15 or 16, and having come from a Christian background, I was an exchange student and kind of got exposed to Buddhism and have been practicing Buddhism ever since. Now, you all know me also as a Huna teacher or a Kumu, and question comes up often around spiritual teachings. Had a great dialogue about the Catholic faith with a patient yesterday who is rediscovering his faith. Born and raised in a rather orthodox Catholic environment. Now, I'm not. I enjoy the Catholic faith. I'm not Catholic. I've been to Mass in Latin. I've been to cathedrals, and I admire and respect really any faith, and in terms of connecting with the all that is. And so, from my point of view, and you don't have to agree, and I realize that religion can be kind of a polarizing thing. What I'm excited to report is that as science and spirituality merge, and I'm a scientist and I'm a spiritual person, and I'm a religious person. Some would consider me a spiritual teacher, spiritual person, and I don't see a conflict in. I think if you, as we say in NLP, if you chunk up, we religion, spirituality, all has the same goal. I think, for enlightenment, for happiness. I did have a seminarian once that came to see me prior to becoming ordained as a priest, and this was many years ago. And I remember him saying, I said, well, isn't the goal of religion to be happy? And he corrected me. He said, no. He said, not in my faith. And he was Catholic. He was in seminary, and he was getting ready to graduate and become ordained as a Catholic priest. And he said, no, happiness is not my. He said, I'd like that. That would be nice. But he said, my job is to serve God. And I said, well, do you get happy serving God? He goes, yeah, I do. I said, okay. And so my intention today is to put, there's a lot of conflict going on in the world right now. And there is this battle between good and evil. And in my own travels, I'm seeing these battles, conflicts between good and evil, I guess. And I'm having in my classes a lot of beings and entities show up, and this isn't a talk about demons or anything like that. But I also follow this Catholic priest who happens to be an exorcist, and if you know, I mean, literally a Vatican trained exorcist. That's what he does, and he has a YouTube channel. And if you want to look him up, he's really interesting to hear him talk. His name is Father Dan Reehil, Reehil, and he talks about his journey, of being, and he tells the story about, he came to the priesthood later in life, and I think he looks to be in his 50s right now, real straight ahead, pragmatic. He would be like, to me, the cool priest, and he is an exorcist. And what's interesting about him, as cool as he is, very modern, very progressive, when you hear him speak about Catholicism, and he speaks about the devil, and he speaks about negative forces, in the world, um, it's very Catholic, very much the Catholic, I don't know, lineage, the Catholic, by the Bible and all that kind of thing. That I don't know. I'm not familiar with all of that stuff, but very interesting man to talk about. And what he says is that the devil, if we talk about devilish forces, now in Buddhism, we talk about the devil of the sixth heaven, and we talk about devilish forces, absolutely the same. There is absolutely, aside from the names and the labels that are placed on some of these monikers, the concept is the same. And whether you believe in a higher power or a source, in Hawaiian we call it Keawe, which is source. In Buddhism we call it the mystic law, right? Some faiths call it God, and so on. It's the same idea. We took our students on a field trip to sacred sites at Mount Charleston, which is the sacred land of the Nuuvi tribe, a Native American tribe, and we studied that indigenous culture. And ironically, the Kumulipo, which is the Hawaiian creation chant, and the creation story of the Nuuvi tribe from thousands of years ago is word for word. And if you look at Revelation, the first book of the Bible in the Old Testament. Now, when I say word for word, I don't mean literally like, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. But it's the same idea. It's the same idea in the Kumulipo, which is the Hawaiian creation chant. And we're learning as we look at all of these different religions and all of these different things, and as we look at quantum physics, quantum mechanics, string theory, as we look at particle accelerators like the CERN in Switzerland, and those are historically very different conversations about science and spirituality. What we're learning is that science is validating that at the very deepest levels of energy is a thin layer of light. And one theorist, and I don't remember if it was Bruce Lipton or who it was, said that beyond that thin layer of light at the quantum level, meaning we have all these measuring devices, electron microscopes and so on, that if you get to the deepest level of matter and antimatter, and at the quantum level, that where the laws of Newtonian physics cease to exist, that beyond that, they said in this particular text, is the resting place of God. So we come full circle. Think about it, right? Newton, and we think about Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics. I don't know. We think of Darwin, we think of Newton. These are, scientists from hundreds of years ago. We get into the 20th century and we get better measuring devices, and we can look at atoms, and we can look at subatomic particles, and we can get, very, very, very granular. And then we get into fractal geometry, which says that just like the DNA sequence, that in our DNA strand is everything about life. And in a fractal geometric sequence is the entire forest in a very small size, meaning that there are patterns, trends, themes, and habits in life that are replicated all over the place. And so fractal, if you look at a forest, apparently scientists can look at a cross section of the Amazon rainforest and be able to detect the health of the entire forest and the predictability of certain growth of certain kinds of plants and trees by looking at a smaller cross section, and that's replicated. Similar with the DNA, similar with the quantum idea around energy and things like that. So I'm not an expert at all. I'm just fascinated by it. I'm certainly not a physicist, but I'm fascinated by how sutras and scriptures for thousands of years have talked about And we would say in a very spiritual sense, there's angels and there's devils and there's demons and there's lions and tigers and bears. So my favorite thing from The Wizard of Oz. And now we have science that's validating that life as we know it. And so we say, jokingly, oh, that's a beautiful being of light. Science is actually saying that we are beings of light. Now, former science, Newtonian, Darwinian physics would say we are carbon-based life forms. God, I sound like such a sciencey guy. Now, this is not intended to be a sciencey talk, but I want to say is that what I'm so pleased about is that science and spirituality are finding common ground. And so when I look at a religious figure like Pope Leo, or I look at a religious figure like the Dalai Lama, or I look at a religious figure like Father Rehil, who I mentioned, who's an exorcist for the Catholic Church, they're all saying the same thing, right? Now, this idea of we teach our children right from wrong. Does one know the difference from right and wrong? What is the nature of evil? How does evil present itself? Why are we deceived by say in the Buddhist term, devilish forces? What is the quality of enlightenment? Like, how do you raise your life condition to become more happy, to become more enlightened? I think I would like to think as humans that we have a mechanism or mechanisms to understand the nature of right or wrong. Now, I'm certainly not the arbiter of right, but what I'm noticing, and I had this patient yesterday who was great, and he just said that he's realizing, now he comes to me, he's an older man, veteran, and he comes to me wrestling with his relationships, with his career, with what he wants his life to be in the next 30 years, God willing that he lives that long. And he probably was very healthy. But what he said yesterday was he's realizing that he has been tempted. Now, he's coming as a Catholic person. I am not a spiritual pastoral counselor. I'm a traditional psychotherapist, among other things. He comes to me as I'm his doctor, I'm his therapist, and he's coming to me talking about, some of the trials and tribulations he's had in the last year or so around his relationships, around his the death of his dog, death of a family member, and really reconciling these things, and really, really frustrated. And he talked yesterday at length about how he has been tempted by the devil. Now, these are his exact words. And I wanted to know more about that. What does that look like? What does it mean to be tempted by the devil? And he said, well, the devilish forces as they are will deceive you. Now, he's not this is really important. He is not talking in a delusional sense, like the devil is in his room and he's having a hallucination of seeing the devil. He is saying that in his version was that the devil is holding out a carrot, and that this carrot has had him on a wild goose chase to find fortune, to find abundance, to find success, things like that. And he realizes that somewhere he lost his way. Now, this is a self-evaluation. He's not asking for my opinion. He's telling me that he realizes that now this is funny because I am, like I said, I'm not a pastoral counselor. And so he said, and what I'm learning is I go back to faith, and I go back to prayer, and I go back to God, and I go back to Jesus. And I was like, oh, did you go back to church? He goes, oh, no, not going back to church. And it was cute because I thought, well, and again, my naivete about if you're becoming more faithful or becoming more grounded in faith and spirituality, is there a community that you'd like to join? And he goes, no, I'm not interested in going back to church. And so understand the duality or the dichotomy that we can be very faithful, we can be very spiritual, and we can do that on our own. And that many people don't find their home, their spiritual home, in an organization, in a religious organization, in a church. Now, I have belonged to a religious organization called the Soka Gakkai International, and I have for 50 years this year. I joined that organization August 4th, 1976. It is February. In August of this year, I will have been a member of that organization. It is a global, international, non-governmental organization. It has affiliates in 193 countries worldwide, and it is a global Buddhist lay organization, which means it's not a priesthood, right? And so it's important to understand that your relationship with faith, with spirituality. Now, what I found really interesting about my patient yesterday was that he said, we get tempted by devilish forces. And so today, what I want to do quickly is I'm going to go through a Buddhist concept called the 10 worlds, sorry, the 10 worlds. And the 10 worlds are states of life. And, you've heard me talk about the three bodies, the four selves, the three selves, the four bodies. We have a physical body, we have an emotional body, a mental body, and a spiritual body. You've heard me talk about the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the higher self or the soul. And this is another way of looking at our lives in a context. And I'll put them in the chat so that you can see them. The lowest state of life, according to the Buddhists, is the state of hell. Hell is number one. It's the lowest. Now, in Father Rehill, the exorcist, when asked on a podcast, is hell a place? He paused and he said, understand, if heaven is a place or a vibrational place, that there is a hell as well, meaning that there would be a place. He said it's probably not what we think, in it, but that it's the result of our own karma. Now, he didn't use the word karma. He said, karma is a very much of a Buddhist Hindu kind of a thing. And the Buddhists would say that there is no actual place that one goes that is hell, but that hell is a state of life. It's a life condition, excuse me, pervaded by negativity and abject suffering. And it's a place where we get to by virtue of our own karma, our own choices. And so what's interesting is that, hell has been portrayed as a fiery place where people go, our souls go, that's full of suffering, and that there's a heaven that's a beautiful flowery place, and that there's a hell which is down there and heaven is up there. And what the Buddhists would say, that hell can happen in this body. You can have a hellish state of life by virtue of bad things happening to good people, or bad things happening to bad people, or by virtue of your own choices in life. And I know, speaking from experience, I've made mistakes and I have experienced hellish conditions. Cancer was a hellish condition. I found great enlightenment out of it, but got to tell you, it was a time of suffering, right? Sometimes our relationships provoke suffering. And so the Buddhists would say that the lowest life condition, the state of abject suffering, is the state of hell. Number two, hunger. And they are in order, 1 through 10, 10 being the highest state of life, the highest vibrational state of life from a frequency point of view. So the next one's hunger. Hunger is the state of lust. It is the state of hunger. It is the state of desire, of wanting, of longing, of yearning in a very desperate kind of state. And so this hunger, it can be physical hunger, meaning starvation. It can be longing for love. It can be longing for money. And you will see people that live in a state of hunger, and they vacillate between hell and hunger, where, and again, I've worked a lot. We had a conversation in student supervision today about forensic psychology and forensic social work. I've done a lot of work at the prisons and the jails with sex offenders and serial killers and things like that. And if you look at a prison population, and I mean no judgment. This is they're sorry, but there are people who live in the state of hell, and then they have a state of hunger, and they steal or they do crimes, and then they end up back in hell, like prison, and then they get out of prison and they offend again, and so on. So the cycle goes. And I mean no judgment. I don't want that for anybody, but that there are people who will cycle between hell and hunger, and they're always desperate for money or desperate for food or desperate for relationships, or and that their state, they don't ever kind of get out of those states of hunger. And hunger is characterized by lust for sexual matters, right? And in relationship talk, we talk about what's the distinction between a karmic relationship and a divine relationship. And a karmic relationship often is one characterized by an unbridled lust or sense of desperation that we have to have that person, right? And that would be a relationship based in the world of hunger, that somehow that person can meet all my needs. Now, whether that's looking for a sugar daddy or sugar mommy who can, pay all my bills. And I've been lately, I watch YouTube and I've been seeing all these like first date scenarios. I don't know. I just watch crazy stuff on YouTube and I'm fascinated by the human condition. I'm a student of of human behavior, where um, there's a channel where the people go on first dates, and there's a thing in the culture where and this is straight relationships, heterosexual relationships, where a man is dating a woman and they meet on an app, and the woman gets in the car and has demands. I want you to do pay for my nails and pay for my hair and pay for my rent and pay for my kids and feed my kids, and we're going to go to a fancy restaurant, and I want to order 10 meals to take home. And the guy, and I don't know whether some of these I know are just staged, they're skits, but I find it really interesting. And then that, according to the Buddhist view, that person is coming from a state of hunger. That really they see a relationship um, as a means to an end, meaning they want their kids fed, and they're in a state of desperation. Joshua says, glad Huna went well. What else is going on this year? There's a centralized location that maybe has a live event calendar and a newsletter that I can get every month. I just don't want to miss anything. You're so funny. Yeah, I'm not really good no, I'm not going to say that. I'm better at sales. Yes, go to drpatrickscott.com, and there is a centralized location where you can find out about all of our classes. We have lots of classes coming up. Realm Travel, which is a psychic reading class, STFU, which is a psychic development class. There's Huna's level 1, 2, 3 happening. If you want to study more about the Huna tradition, there's you can work with me individually. And okay, that's enough. And again, it's awesome, and I love working with you all. So that's hunger. So that's number 2. Number 3 is animality. um, So helpful, Joshua says. So animality is number 3, the third state of life. Now, these are sequential, they are orderly, and they go up in vibration. And so if people are characterized by abject hunger, meaning lust and need for money, abundance, things, material things, relationships, got to have it. Animality is the next state of life, according to the Buddhists, that has a dog eat dog quality. So if you go back to the criminal realm, maybe prison is hell, and they get out of prison and they're stealing again, and then they're victimizing vulnerable people. They're doing credit card fraud. They're stealing things from old people. They're scamming, that kind of thing, in a very much dog eat dog. I'm going to get over on you. You have what I need. I'm going to take it from you. And if I have to hurt you to do it, I'm going to hurt you. And so animality exists in the corporate world, the climbing, the keeping up with the Joneses, which is if you haven't heard that term, that is, well, my neighbor has a new car, I better get a new car. Neighbor has a new boat, I better get a new boat. The always constantly striving for greater things, but more in an animalistic sense, that I'm going to victimize you. I'm going to take advantage of you. You have what I want. I'm going to get what I need to do. And that happens all over the place. We see it in social media, the FOMO, like with the FOMO, fear of missing out. Wow, people post I always love it. Here I am on social media, and you see my beautiful office, and I would imagine, people look like, wow, he's really made it. If you knew, this is in a very low income area of Las Vegas. This is a ghetto dwelling clinic. This building is from the 1980s, and it is hardly glamorous. I love it. I love, because I'm doing my mission and I'm doing my purpose. And so the state of animality is very much I'm going to get over on you. I'm going to take advantage of you. And there are people, I'm sorry. I went to Egypt a number of years ago, and how can I say this without sounding pompous and arrogant? I don't think I can, so here it goes. In in the world. I am not going to say this is unique to the third world, but in poorer countries, if you've traveled at all in the world, we in the United States and many Western nations enjoy a standard of living that is unparalleled. Abraham Maslow, the noted psychiatrist who created Maslow's hierarchy of needs, says, and he's been dead for years, and he said this in the 20th century. He said he used to think that there was a hierarchy of needs, like once you met your basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter, and then you moved up, and that you got to this pinnacle of the pyramid called self-actualization. And he said, I really don't think it's sequential, because he says, and he was not American. I think he was Austrian or Hungarian or something. I should know, but I don't know what his ethnicity was or his country of origin. Not American. And he said, and I've been to the United States, and this is a direct quote, where there is more wealth than the world has ever known. I'm directly quoting him now. The United States has more wealth than the world has ever known, more wealth than even the pharaohs. And there's still suffering and misery. And for all of the money and all of the stuff and all of the billions and all of the jets and the yachts and all of it, misery. And he said that he used to think that money bought happiness. And I will tell you, working with billionaires, I don't work with many, but I have a couple now, some of the most miserable people that I've ever met. Sorry, love you, but wow, to be a billionaire, and I don't understand the mechanism to be a billionaire. That's more way above my pay grade. But I will tell you that the few billionaires that I've seen that have come to me for help are pretty unhappy, and that they, come to me for figuring it out. Like, wow, I had my one guy years ago who, had the Gulfstream. He bought the Gulfstream, and he thought that would be the end, the be all end all. It's a private jet, by the way. And after a few years, he came in one day to the office. This was many years ago. He said, "Well, big victory in my therapy. I really want to report to you, I sold the Gulfstream." And I said, "Well, yippee, congratulations. What prompted that?" And he said, I'm getting to the age where I realize I've done everything that I've ever wanted, and I've had everything I've ever wanted, and I better figure out a way to be happy that money doesn't buy it." And it's easy to say that when you're a billionaire, right? We all go, "Wow, wouldn't that be nice?" But he was regularly reconciling at his age and his generation and what he wanted, that the airplane no longer held any sort of allure. And I recall an actress who was in a series in the 80s called Dynasty. Her name was Linda Evans, and she's still alive. She doesn't work anymore. And I saw her interviewed shortly after she retired. And she retired from acting, has never been seen since. And she said, they said, "Well, why don't you continue acting?" And she said, "Frankly, I didn't enjoy it that much. Number two, I have enough money where I don't need to work anymore. I've made enough money that I don't need to work, and I would rather do other things." Animal rescue, and I don't know if you've heard, but Keanu Reeves, the actor, has founded a beautiful animal rescue in California, where he donated like $500 million, and I may be actually finding homes for animals there. And so there are people who they get their money, and then they find the ways that the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, started the Gates Foundation as a way to help the world. Even, Elon Musk, the richest guy in the world, looking for ways to make sure everybody in the world has internet, that kind of thing. And so there is something that happens. We're going to talk about those higher ordered thinking, where, like, what money can buy, right? So where were we? We were at hunger, then we were at animality. There we go. Yeah. So number 4 is anger. That's state number 4. Now, the 4 lower worlds, hell, hunger, animality, and anger, comprise the 4 lower worlds, and that there are many people in the world that live in and around and cycle through those things. And anger is just what it says. It's angry. They have an angry nature. They're really pissed off. They live in a sense of kind of feeling victimized, feeling done to, and that they live in that sense of anger most of the time. Now, interestingly, as we move up the hit parade, the next one is called, I'm going to do a few of them: learning, realization, humanity. Those are the next 3. And then rapture. Now, This is a big departure from what we think. Rapture, if you follow a Christian context, is kind of the be all end all. I'm in the rapture, meaning I have so much happiness, so much bliss. Not according to the Buddhists. And whether you look at learning, realization, humanity, and rapture, and those are in different orders depending on who you talk to. There are those people, maybe they've moved out of the four lower worlds and they're in school and they're studying and they're wanting to help people and they're looking at their own humanity. It's a much more vibrationally, to me, appealing life condition than the four lower worlds. And that then I work as at a teaching place. I'm going to tell you that one of my heart is teaching. I'm doing this. I love teaching. I can teach for the rest of this body, however, until there's breath in my body. I love helping others and I love teaching. And so, ironically, in a Buddhist concept, it's so weird. It was always so weird to me that right next to anger was learning. Like, really? But as you move up the food chain of these worlds, to get out of the four lower worlds takes a lot of work. And if you look at your life condition, you look at the life conditions of your family members, to move out of those four worlds, lower worlds, and get into learning, realization, humanity, and rapture, takes a lot of work. And so I have a bunch of students here now are in that learning phase, and it's stressful. Graduate school is stressful, doctoral school is stressful, medical school is stressful. And it's not a bad thing, it's a wonderful thing, but it is not the enlightenment that people think it is, right? Just by virtue. In fact, if you've been to graduate school or if you've been to medical school or residency or whatever, it's its own hell. Sorry. And so I think that's why the Buddhists. Now, this theory, by the way, is thousands of years old. This is not new. Very, very, very old in the scriptures and the sutras from thousands, 3,000 years ago. So I'm going to bunch them: learning, realization, humanity, and rapture, because I think we confuse rapture with enlightenment. That if I now in and among these can be addictions, the rapture, right? Now, please do your best to not think of rapture because I think, forgive me, and I'm not Christian. If the rapture, I think, is when you go home, you go to heaven, and you're in the rapture with God. The Buddhists think of it a little bit differently. They think about it in terms of this sort of what we think will bring us happiness, material things, the family. We strive, right? We're striving. We're learning. We're becoming self-aware. We are considering our humanity. And then finally, our goal is to become happy, and that we spend our lives chasing those things that we think are going to make us happy. Money, we think of relationships. Joshua says rapture means consumed by. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Means consumed by. Meaning, if only I had the jet, if only I had the yacht, if only I had the body. Right now, I've been doing, you know me, if I've been on this health thing for a while, and it's really great. And like many of us, I thought, well, when I get to a certain weight, then I'll be happy. When I go to a certain size, then I'll be happy. When I have the certain car, then I'll be happy. When I have a certain, this is funny, I thought when I was a teenager, if I ever made $5,000, that's it. I'm rich, right? And then that number just kept going up, right? And we have those arbitrary benchmarks. If only I could make $100,000 or $50,000, or if I could only have the kind of relationship, if I could only have the certain car or the certain clothes, the certain watch. And we learn, and Linda Evans said this was that actress from Dynasty. She said, I realized that it's easy for me to say. Now, by the way, in the grand scheme of things, I don't know what Linda Evans' net worth is, but she made enough money on that show for however many seasons it ran. Joshua says, if only I had a BMW that I drive in Germany. There you go. That's enlightenment, and we all have our enlightenment ideas. And so she said, I It's easy for me to say, having made the money that I have, and that I just don't want to act anymore, that I don't find that satisfying. I want to do other things. And so I don't know what she's done. She's not in the public eye. You could look her up. I'm sure there's a Wikipedia a page on Linda Evans. Um, Tippi Hedren was noted for her animal rights stuff. Keanu Reeves still works as an actor, but he's doing all sorts of humanitarian and animal rights kinds of things. Bill Gates, now, if you look at Jeff Bezos or any of the super duper billionaires, they have their pet projects that they do. I mean, I admire them. I admire Elon Musk wanting to have everybody have internet. I admire Bill Gates. He wants everybody in the world to have clean water, fresh water. That's one of his big things. And those are noble, noble pursuits. And they're going to get into the next and last two worlds that we're going to get in. And so you get to figure out where, now the goal of practice, the goal of our life is to raise our vibration so that we're living in the higher worlds, that we're not in hell, we're not in hunger, we're not in animality, that I can't be happy unless you're miserable, or I don't get to have, like, that scarcity mentality, like if I have it, you can't have it, or if you have it, that means you're taking it away from me. That's the animality business. Then the whole anger thing. The four middle worlds, if you will, are awesome. It feels great to be in school. It feels great to be that consumed by, that passionate by the rapture kind of idea. Now, the last two worlds that we're going to talk about, the ninth world is Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva. I'm not sure if that's the right way to spell it, but that's what you're getting today. A bodhisattva of the earth, according to the Buddhists, this particular brand of Buddhism, is someone who has incarnated to help others. And there are many examples of people that would be defined as a bodhisattva. Now, bodhisattva from the old Hindu tradition is literally kind of an angel, if you to use it in the Western, an angel from God that comes to the earth that doesn't need to have to help people, right? And so a bodhisattva, by definition, is someone for whom they have a life of service. They have a life dedicated to the service of others. They have a life often selfless, where they're not in it for their own personal gain. They exist to help, excuse me, and help others. Mother Teresa would be, could be considered. Again, I'm going to use global figures, and if you've read at all about Mother Teresa, she was a pistol. She was quite feisty, and there's this great story about her meeting with Rudy Giuliani, the then mayor of New York City, and they had asked her to come from Calcutta, India, to open an order of her, I don't know what you call it, her order of nuns, her organization, and she was having a meeting with Rudy Giuliani to say, you want me to come here, in India, in Calcutta, we feed the poor, and that's what we do. We feed the poor. That's our mission. New York City is a lot more expensive than Calcutta, and then apparently there was going to be this big donation of a building, a commercial building, like a 4-story old brownstone or something, that the city of New York. This is great. This is a great story. And I actually met. It's kind of hazy, but I met somebody who had interviewed Mother Teresa back in the day. And if you don't know who she is, you can look her up. Mother Teresa was a nun, and from India, and her whole life was of service. I don't know if she was canonized or not, meaning got sainthood after her death. But at any rate, so she's meeting with the mayor of New York, and they're saying with great political fanfare, "Oh, look at what we're doing. Aren't we magnanimous? We have this building, and we would like to give it to you, donate it to your order, and we would like you to come with your nuns to feed the poor here in New York City because we're so wonderful." And she was great. There's a transcript of the interview. Basically said, Mr. Mayor, very erudite lady, very simple, quite a pistol, quite difficult, quite ornery and cranky. She said, "Mr. Mayor, that's really great. And you understand that in India, we don't have the same disability requirements that you have. We don't have the same codes that you have. You're giving us a broken down building that needs," and the number was $4 million, worth of renovation to bring it up to code just to be acceptable to be a nonprofit in the city of New York. It's like she did her homework. She was, she's not an unintelligent person, right? She's well into her 70s or 80s at this point. And she's saying, it's thank you so much for giving us this dilapidated, broken down building that does not meet the fire code. It does not meet the health and safety code. It does not meet all of your ADA requirements for ramps and elevators and all that kind of stuff. And now you're asking my order. We're in from India that feeds the poor, that hasn't really we don't have a lot of money. We don't have the funds to get your building up to code. Now you can hear through that, sorry, it was like a political photo op. And she called him on it. She said, if you guys would front also the money to if you're going to hand us a building that we can use, we're happy to accept it. But with this contract is way more money than we have. We are very poor. We feed the poor. All of our money goes to feeding the poor in India. If you want us to feed the poor in New York, you're going to have to pony up some more money. Now, end of the story, punchline is she didn't ever come to New York. She never, because, and again, Rudy Giuliani was the mayor. He did a lot of great things in New York, but again, he was the figurehead. But there wasn't an additional $4 million to give her for that, right? Now, I say that as a bodhisattva of the earth, we can say, oh, that's an angelic figure that comes down from above and that helps the. No. She was very tough, and I was a book about her. It was a biography. It was a photo book that I looked at a number of years ago, and she was tough. So don't make no mistake that they're these flowery, beautiful beings of light that have no anger, and now the anger or feistiness that she had as a bodhisattva of the earth was not living in the world of anger. She was just very tough about what she needed to do her mission and so on like that. So if you look at the Dalai Lama, you look at Daisaku Ikeda, the president of the Soka Gakkai, who passed away a number of years ago. President Ikeda, I've met a number of times, also can be very tough, but clearly a bodhisattva of the earth. So you can look at yourself, and if you lead a life of service, if you're a clinician or a healer or a doctor or something, you may have chosen a life of service, and that's awesome. That doesn't mean you don't get pissed off. It doesn't mean so the other thing is we're not going to have time to talk about it today, but the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, which is that it's not a sequential like stepping stone. Just because you're a bodhisattva or you're in the world of rapture doesn't mean you don't get angry from time to time. The whole goal here is that the goal is that you live in the higher worlds and that you take your time with being of service, and that your goal is to get to the 10th world, which is the world of Buddhahood. And I'm going to put that in the chat. Buddhahood. Now, it's a direction. It's not a destination. I'm pausing because I'm getting all these texts, and I love you all. And if you are trying to text me now and you're not in the chat, I'm not answering texts right now. So I'm getting, I've had like 12 texts while I've been on this live. So forgive me for being distracted. So I will get back to you. So Buddhahood. Desmond Tutu, who was an archbishop in Africa, and the Dalai Lama were good friends. If you look at Maya Angelou, if you look at even Oprah, if you look at, now I'm not saying, now this is the fun part. In 1974, a book by Sheldon Kopp was written called If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him. And the idea is that anyone who claims to be a Buddha is not. Anyone who claims to be enlightened is not. Anyone who presents you a bill of goods that says, I am the be all end all, please follow me, should raise your antenna. And this is the whole cult figure idea. And Father Rehill, the exorcist that I was talking about earlier, would say that devilish, now this is my language, he would say the devil. He would say the devil presents himself in certain ways and will try to deceive you. Buddhists would say devilish forces are at work, and that anyone who claims to be enlightened is not. Anyone who self aggrandizes and says that they are a Buddha or that they are in the world of Buddhahood is not. Now, I have some examples about this. I saw President Ikeda interviewed. I was in the room with President Ikeda, who was a very, very smart man, a very wonderful man who passed away a number of years ago, head of the Buddhist organization. And somebody just said, "Sensei, are you a Buddha?" And he laughed. He just giggled, and he went, "Oh God, no." I mean, he just rolled his eyes and said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I have my moments. I have glimpses of, enlightenment. I have glimpses of that world. Uh, but no, heavens, no. I am not a Buddha." Same thing. Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu had a series of dialogues, and somebody in the audience said, "Your Holiness, are you a Buddha?" And he giggled. He just went, "Oh, no, 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 no." No, 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 no. Do not put that on me. And he didn't even say he had his moments. He was just like, "Oh, no, no, no." And so I don't think it's false humility. I think there's something developmentally that when we are at that state, that another author named Krishnamurti, who again was a 20th century author, pretty enlightened, and on the scale of things, pretty enlightened people followed him. And I'm not going to say he was a cult figure at all. He wrote a lot of books. He was a kind of a guru, and even he, so I don't know how that works. I really don't. I don't know. I don't know if you get to maybe when you get to that stage of Buddhahood and enlightenment, you just make your transition because you don't need to be on the earth anymore. I really don't know, but I'm going to say that if you're watching this and you follow me and you're interested in helping others, that you may be a bodhisattva of the earth, quite probably, and that you look at enlightenment, you look at Buddhahood as the pinnacle of the realization of all of your hopes and dreams. But I think by definition, if your ego is all wound up in "I'm a Buddha," that's a devilish force, and I know it's confusing, because you'd think, well, there's 10 worlds. I would really like to become enlightened. I'd like to become a Buddha in this lifetime. And I think whether you look at some of our historical figures, if you look at Jesus, or you look at Muhammad, or you even look at more recent examples of what we do to leaders, people like Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Nelson Mandela and global leaders, we persecute them. It's what we do. It's what humans do, is we persecute those who could help us. Now, you can also look historically at cult leaders, Jim Jones and David Koresh, who I think Father Rahal would say were devilish forces, that we're using. And they were also persecuted, but they also did a lot. You look at Hitler, you look at some of the genocide that's happened globally under the guise of dictators and Saddam Hussein and things like that. And there's always different points of view. Understand that from the point of view of the individual, everybody thinks they're right. Hitler thought he was right. Saddam Hussein thought he was right. Everybody thinks they're right. Even if you look at the political discourse now, which is very polarizing in the United States, everybody thinks they're right. And from their point of view, maybe they are. It's only up to the individual to really decide where you stand, on these things. So the goal with the 10 worlds up against what's going on politically and globally now is, can you elevate your life condition through practice, through study, through prayer, through practices of whatever, you know, can you elevate your life condition to get out of those four lower worlds? So take a moment as a result of watching this recording or this class and think about, okay, how much time do I spend in hell, hunger, animality, and anger? Am I just kind of a pissed off person? And then, start there. And if you tend to be more in the learning, realization, humanity, uh, rapture, yeah, awesome. Is there some movement for you into bodhisattva, which is more of a selfless dedication to others? I am not suggesting it. It's not. I mean, if you look at some of the people that I've talked about that live like bodhisattvas of the earth, it's a big job. People need a lot of help, and so I think that'll be enough for today. So why don't we wrap it up? I wish you the best. Take a look and consider the 10 worlds of Buddhism, and we will talk at another live event soon.